Thanks so much, Megan. Thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks to our panelists for joining us. You each have unique and different experiences with starting new businesses in the ag tech sector. So I think we're just going to start by going through our panelists and having you explain a little bit about your involvement in the agriculture technology world and what problems you're trying to solve with what you're doing.
Yeah, so my name is Cussen, and I represent LiteFarm. LiteFarm is an open source platform and community. It's essentially a free and open source farm management application for farmers that are current or aspiring sustainability pioneers. So we've been adopted by about 5,000 users in 150 countries. And the primary space that we're operating in is really diversified agriculture, practicing agroecology in many cases. So I think that's more or less the answer to what I'm doing and what LiteFarm is.
Thanks, Kevin.
Hi, I'm Peter Gross. I'm a co-founder and chief technology officer of Lucent BioSciences. We started Lucent BioSciences back in 2014 looking specifically at sustainability in the agricultural sector, and what we've done recently is we've rolled out and taken to market the world's first water-insoluble, non-polluting fertilizer, which may not make sense right now, but it does. And we recently just opened up our full-scale manufacturing facility in Saskatchewan, which is close to where our customers are. And when I say recently, I mean yesterday. So, yeah, that's the quick synopsis. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I'm the owner of Aright Greentech Canada. We are a modular container farm using hydroponics to grow lettuce. The problem I'm trying to solve is we import 90% of our lettuce from California, so I'm just trying to provide that fresh lettuce here. And we grow about 15,000 heads per week, and we are a 15,000 square feet facility.
Hi, my name is Hassan. I used to work for an agtech startup which went bankrupt back in August. So that's the problem working for startups, right? That's the reason why I have my own company now. The focus that I have working with startups is to get them off the ground. What I do with clean tech, sustainability, and ag tech companies is understanding what they're doing and how they get to market, following the commercialization plan. The challenges I have with my startup, we were rescuing food from the farms, valorizing it, upcycling it to make different products using different freeze-dry technologies or different drying technologies, as well as different separation methods to get different enzymes and different fibers out.
My name is Mark. I think you've seen some of my aircraft outside. We are a precision crop tech, and our focus has been on trying to find ways that we can make farming more efficient, reducing the amount of input costs, reducing the amount of input chemicals that go into the fields, and we're looking to be more efficient with labor. Can our aircraft spray a field in a couple of hours that would take a day normally? Can we have robotics that are going around the field doing the weeding, cutting and trimming plants, turning over the soil, laying sawdust? Those are the types of things that we are focusing on, is automating the farming process so that you can get a better, more consistent crop with lower input costs.
Thanks, guys. So Peter, we'll start with you on this round. You have, I want to ask this to each of you, but to start, what's one thing that makes either our region, if you're located here, or in Saskatchewan, if you've recently started something there, what makes it particularly well-suited to growing an ag tech business? And then I'm going to follow that with what's one thing that the region or our region, if it's here, can do better to foster more agriculture technology?
So we actually started on the campus of Simon Fraser University in Burnaby at 4D Laboratories. And for those of you who don't know, 4D Laboratories is a public-private partnership, and it's a material science NASA. And we had a very, very specific material, like we're a science-based, very, very much science-based organization. And we had a very specific question about material science, and one of them was, can we make a form of iron that is in the proper form that it can be uptaken by phytoplankton? which is totally different than what we're doing now. But the research that was done there, we ended up with a material that was able to deliver nutrients to plants, i.e. phytoplankton, in seawater without releasing the nutrients into seawater. And then one of the professors at SFU went, hey, have you tried this with plants? And then we went, well, why would we do that? And then we realized that was the stupidest thing we've ever said. So after a short period of research, we discovered that these compounds that were designed to release key nutrients to plankton in seawater worked extremely well in soils and had unique attributes. So the R&D and the initial science was done at 4D Labs, and SFU takes no intellectual property ownership. And that was a huge bonus for us. And the other thing is the cost of doing our research at 4D Labs was basically like pocket change. After that, we moved to a scale-up facility, an initial piloting facility, which we still have in Coquitlam. And then we had to move up to full-scale manufacturing. And we did this in Saskatchewan because that's, one of the center, that's right in the center of huge ag. And just to give you it's kind of a funny joke. Some of my employees who are also engineers and scientists are farmers too. They say, we have a hobby farm. It's like, oh, that's cool. Like, how big is your hobby farm? Like an acre or two? And it goes, no, 3,000. So we have multiple locations. The thing that was pivotal for us is having access to the laboratory facilities and the intellectual capacity of all the scientists and engineers at 4D Labs that helped us scale quickly. And also having access, once we started moving forwards, having access to the capitalization system here. So very important steps for us were Foresight, BC. I don't know if there's anyone from Foresight here, but that was our first step. Yeah. Okay, awesome, thanks. The next one's been mentioned here before was CDL, Creative Destruction Labs. We went through their program, and at the conclusion of their program, some of our advisors actually became investors, which triggered other investors to come through. So I hope that wasn't too long of an answer, but that's the synopsis.
That's great. I'm just going to actually follow up one quick. So why did you decide, you mentioned it a little bit, but what was the pivotal thing that made you decide when you decided to go to Saskatchewan to do that work in Saskatchewan and not in BC? Was it the land mainly?
Okay, I can tell you exactly why. In the demand for our product in BC and the demand for our product in Saskatchewan were on different levels. So what we learned how to do in BC was how to manufacture our product in our piloting facility at 30 kilograms a day, but our facility in Saskatchewan is 20,000 kilograms a day. So with that scale, you've got to be able to sell it, you've got to put it to market. And obviously in Saskatchewan with the giant, like one of the growers we're working with is almost 300,000 acres. So at that scale, we can move our product without having to transport it for huge distances and make it affordable for the growers and still have margins for our company and our investors.
Thanks. So Tanya, to you, why did you decide to start your agtech startup here, and then what are some of the challenges that come along with that?
I started in Abbotsford because we are an agricultural community. It made obvious sense to me to start here. Land in Vancouver is pretty expensive, so I moved out as far as I could. Challenges were quite a bit, and I can go on forever, but I initially wanted to start this business in 2019, and that's the time when COVID was also happening. But it took me a while to understand our land use policies, and in the morning we touched on ALR, and I went through those struggles. Like I had my application stuck in there. We're sending you the approval in 15 days, and then here I was 4 months after, like, okay, land prices have gone up. Should I just sell? Maybe we're not ready for agtech. So those were some land use policies issues I had, and in fact, up until the end of 2022, what I was doing, I was really questioning because how our land use policies are, how the marketing of lettuce has been set up in BC. Am I really a farmer, right? And I didn't fall into those guidelines forever. It's so nice to have something like this where we can be a part of agtech and be invited, because an organization of mine cannot be a member of any agricultural setup organizations that are there. So that's still a challenge. And yeah, like I still have lettuce that I'm throwing away every week, which has no tip burns. It's all good quality, but it doesn't fit the criteria of how greenhouses have been growing. So I'm still on that challenge, and financing was a challenge. Of course, I had Farm Credit Canada, but the setup here is very different on how things are done in India and Singapore, where we do have agtech investments and farm investments. So it's not as inviting. So yeah.
Thank you. Hassan, tell us about how BC's ecosystem affected yours.
Yeah, so one thing great about the Lower Mainland is access to diversity of different produce, different fruits. Having greenhouses, having blueberries, cranberries, they all require different harvesting times, they require different soil requirements, right? So when you look at waste, how it's being generated, as you go with lettuce, if it doesn't fit the bill, it was getting thrown away. So looking at understanding what each farmer was doing at a smaller scale makes it easier to understand the bigger scale market. Because a lot of the markets, there's a lot of farming companies out there which are way bigger and have way more access to capital than we do. So being in the Lower Mainland, it was easy to talk to greenhouses, talk to blueberry farms, even go to Bowen Island and talk to the cideries, look at apple trees. Understanding that aspect in a small area where you can easily make connections was key to us. The challenges was finance, right? Getting the capital in from locals, meaning people in BC to invest in our companies. All investment was coming from overseas. That caused challenges. Just finding real estate, which was CFIA approved. Going through the entire approval process was a nightmare. Do we build a facility here, or do we go down to the States where it could be easier to go through the entire process? So benefits, diversity, a lot of farms, a lot of different vegetation. Everyone wanted to try. They grew saffron here, I think, last year, if I remember correctly, and I was like, wow. Like growing saffron, which is not from Afghanistan, is a big deal. So just that innovation itself, but then not able to have resources in terms of land and financials. That makes it troubling. That's where we kind of really struggled on who do we sell our product to if no one's willing to invest in it.
Thanks, Hassan. Mark, I know you have some thoughts on both sides of this question.
Yeah, it's been a long time that we've gone through this process. 2015 we started. 2017 we opened our company to focus specifically on agricultural technology, and particularly focusing on the drones. And we ran into Transport Canada, NAV Canada, Health Canada, and the list goes on, and that's just at the federal level. We then ran into the provincial regulators who were extremely slow and not wanting to see new technology, and it was going beyond what they could understand and accept. And after 7 years of trying, we've gone through Transport Canada. We now have categories for advanced pilots who are reviewed, who have been full medicals. They have a whole list of credentials which are probably in excess of anything that I ever had to do as a private pilot. If I want to get an application in to do spraying on a field, it takes 30 days for just the review of that document. I'm submitting a 200-page document to get permission to fly in a particular area. If I fly a private airplane, I can go to Abbey Airport now, show my pilot's license, hire an aircraft, file my flight plan, and I can be flying in 30 minutes. Just to give you a comparison of how tightly this is regulated. So if I'm going to now go and fly one of my drones and I run into I can spray nutrients, I can spray stimulants, I can do all sorts of things like that, as long as it's not a side. As soon as it becomes a side, it's regulated by PMRA, and PMRA has been unrelenting in releasing or giving authority to actually be able to spray this. 7 years of trials that we've been going through. This year we've done another whole set of trials across the whole of Canada, and we still don't know whether this is going to become a reality. So it's extremely regulated, and once we get past that, we now have to go to the provincial level and start getting applicator licenses and licensing of companies that are going to be using drones. And although we've been speaking to them for multiple years, there's very little movement over there. So those are some of the challenges that we have. But why is Abbotsford such a great place to do it? Lots of small farms, lots of variety, lots of people needing to be super efficient so that they can actually make this work for themselves on an agricultural basis. And that creates a huge amount of opportunity for us, because taking our aircraft into Saskatchewan is very easy because we can swarm them. We can put 5 aircraft up in the air at one time, and we can do the 10,000 acres. But we also need something that can be working here in Abbotsford where it's 10, 20, and 40 acre plots of land. And that makes it a really interesting challenge because we have to be able to answer not only in the small, but also in the large. What do we see? BC has been pretty slow on a regulatory process. Federally, they're quite slow on a regulatory process. But if we go to Manitoba, they've already got an applicator's license for drones. They've opened it up already. The USA has dropped a lot of their regulations because they see the efficiency that comes with that. But Canada is now 7 years behind everyone else. If we take the Abbotsford show that we had this year, the Agri Show, 7 o'clock before the show opened on the first morning, we had people from Alberta standing in front of our booth, and they were saying, come to Alberta, we'll give you financing, we'll do this, come and develop your products. They had done their research before the show even started, knew what we were doing, even knew some of the investors we had been speaking to, and knew the products that we were doing, especially on our field robotics, where we were trying to go. BC, we have to go and scratch out those funding agencies. We have to find people who are looking for it. The other provinces are coming to us and inviting us to come and do it over there. So it's really a chalk and cheese type situation. If we've got this great potential over here of all these different farms, huge space for innovation, but we're not supporting that innovation, whereas the other provinces are picking us up and then coming in and basically capturing our attention. And if we want to do something over here, we have to get onto the land. We need to be able to have access to areas where we can test our equipment. And we need places where we can collaborate with other people who are entrepreneurs, who are innovating and trying to think outside of the box on how we can actually make it work. And something like that would be extremely useful in this area. So I think I've answered your question of what's so attractive here. I think I've answered your question of why it's so challenging here, and potentially a way forward.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Kevin, I think your startup's really focused and makes use of people and knowledge. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. But sorry, I've been a little distracted. I've been trying to figure out if Peter's pivotal comment was an irrigation pun, or if that was just something else. I was really impressed with the amount of the density of puns at the first half of the program, but it's kind of fallen off.
I've got one, but let's do it later.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, we can trade. So LiteFarm started as a research project at the University of British Columbia, and it's now a worldwide community-led platform and community. So I can talk about some of the things that have been really helpful about being here and starting here. I think Hassan brought up, just the amount of farms and the diversity of crops that are being grown. That's incredible. As a startup, you want to iterate as quickly as you can to do a bunch of little experiments, place a lot of little bets, and learn as fast as you can. And having a lot of farmers growing a lot of things lets you do that. So that's really, really helpful. There's obviously like a really strong pipeline of talent and partners. There's many scientists, excellent post-secondary institutions here to partner with. And then I'll be very brief. I would say the challenge is, number one, expense. Like on the plus side, with high-value crops, you have farmers that are willing to invest in innovative solutions, because that's when you're getting a big payout, you're willing to spend more money to get to that payout. But then on the flip side, it's so hard to do just about anything, right? Like if you need land, it's very expensive. If you need equipment, it's expensive to build here. So I would say cost is the primary challenge, at least for us.
Thanks, Kevin. That dovetails pretty well to our next question, which I want to know, and we'll try and keep this fairly brief because we don't have a ton of time, but how did you, and what advice would you give to somebody who is trying to muster the resources to start a company, start an ag tech business, and find the people, knowledge, or just financial resources that you need to do that? Tanya, maybe you can start us off.
I think for agriculture, the main organization we worked with was Farm Credit Canada. We had a great experience working with them. So, I mean, I did go to the main 4 banks as well, but was turned away. So, yeah, so FCC is it. But I just feel that with FCC as well, the funding programs they have is very differently set up with what's there in India or Singapore. And that is very, like, AgTech is very capital intensive. Like, all my friends here are AgTech creators. I'm the user of that AgTech. I didn't create the way we're growing lettuce. I purchased that setup. And so in terms of like getting capital, yes, we got the capital, but it's very different. So for instance, where we were talking about Singapore by 2030, they want to be 30% self-sufficient. It's a very aggressive program where they want to be 50-50 for capital funding, whereas here it was 70-30. Right? And that can make a huge difference. There is an organization in India, which is NABARD, which is similar to FCC, but you don't have to pay any principal or interest for 12 months. So I feel like that kind of research, when you're looking into capital, like what am I getting into, is important to know. And things that we couldn't have guessed is like interest rates doubling up. And that will affect agtech owners who are adopting this expensive technology already. It's make or break it kind of a situation with high interest rates. So there needs to be like discussion about that, like how do we protect that? In terms of knowledge, we are a great community. I was new to Canada. I immigrated to Canada in 2014, started this business, thinking about it in 2019. And anybody I reached out to in the community for help or advice, I always got it. And it was just Google search, like who else is growing lettuce here? And everybody is so welcoming in the community. So I guess don't be afraid to reach out to other people in the community. Don't be afraid to reach out to your local chamber or your local city people. They will guide you as to what's possible and what's not, right? Yeah.
Thank you. Hassan?
I would say just finding the resources. As you mentioned, Foresight and CDL. Getting as a startup is always first is discovery interviews, right? Is your startup actually going to work it out? Is it actually be commercially viable, right? A lot of patents get put in, it's not commercially viable. Sometimes just finding people to interview who can give you honest answers, right? As an entrepreneur, as someone who helps a lot of startups, is always getting the product market fit, understanding is this viable or not. And oftentimes people don't do that first level. Second is, I think it goes back to manufacturing. When you want spare parts, when you want something new, you have to go to Mexico, you have to go to China, you have to go to the States. That's a lead time easily of 3 months or 6 months. The startup I'm working with right now, they did all the manufacturing outside of Canada, having it shipped in, having it come in to get sold. So one of the biggest challenges we have in BC is like, hey, we want a lot of tech people coming in, we want to put money into SaaS companies, but agriculture is going to feed the population. And if you don't have manufacturing capacity to support the ag tech companies to build, to give them the resources and the land, we'll always go outside of the country, go all the way to Ontario, asking them to do manufacturing. And that has been one of the biggest challenges, and that kind of causes the intensive burn rate of every startup company, especially when you're scaling up. Because once we start scaling up, it's like, we need a food scientist. We go to Saskatchewan. We need to talk to someone who can do the testing for us. Let's go to Vineland Research in Ontario. The only benefit we had was having one of the massive greenhouses here and having the discussion, but the resources of manufacturing was key and just getting the people to work for us. AgTech has a really thin margin because we work on volumes. So there's no way we can get a really good manufacturing engineer for $100K when someone else is willing to pay them 200K. So having support from the government on, hey, we understand your ag tech, you're going to struggle because it is capital intensive, here's additional support. So finding those right people, understanding the different grants, going through IRAP and SDC, hoping they give you money and not give it to someone else who is more tech-based, more going like, hey, here's a new SaaS company, we're going to give everyone data, and that'll be good. But everyone's going to go hungry.
Thanks, Hassan. Mark, drones aren't cheap. How do you get the money to build them?
It's been an interesting, long journey, as I mentioned. So we grew out of an engineering company that I had set up, and we financed ourselves. We spoke to local farmers. We saw an opportunity. They saw the opportunity. We got something going on the imaging side and then the LiDAR side, and that started to generate a bit of revenue. So we basically, every time we got something, we just reinvested it back in the company. And it's not a great model, but it works because essentially we know that everything that we're doing has got value to people and there is a need for it. And we have continued to do that, but what we also did is we started developing larger drones. And we thought, well, it would be great if the Canadian government would relent and let us start actually flying them over here in a larger capacity, but that hasn't happened. So what we did instead was we went back to the folks who we had approached to help us build the drones, and we collaborated with them to build better drones. So we wrote the software for 2 of the manufacturers. We helped redesign the DJI drone that everyone knows DJI. They built great camera drones, but they didn't build great agricultural drones. So we told them what was needed to do it. We showed them how to configure the software, and a lot of the changes that we've brought to the table are now implemented in the new drones. So that's how we've benefited from this. They've benefited from it, and we have a really good working relationship with them. Our ideal is to start building them here locally, and we want to do that, but the market just isn't there because we're over-regulated and we're basically being stopped by the government. So we're also moving into the robotics side where we look at using ground robots which are not so regulated. And that for us has been, we can use our engineering skills, but now we're starting on a second arm of our business. It's no longer just aerial applicators. We're now also looking at ground applicators. And we have, as soon as we started making a bit of noise about that, the investors were coming in from overseas right away. And we've had a whole string of investors who want to buy into the company, providing we do the manufacturing in the countries where they come from. So the US is really big on that. And we've got quite a few Indian companies and Chinese companies that have jumped onto that. We've got folks coming out of the Middle East who are offering huge sums of money to buy into what we're doing. And we're resisting at the moment simply because we want to keep it in-house, because we've got such a great opportunity to create something that can be scalable from a small farm to a large farm. And we've got a totally different way of approaching it because all the folks in my company are engineers by training and scientists by training. And so they base it on data and what they see being needed. And they base it on being farmers, because many of the folks that work with us are also farmers. So they know what needs to be done. And it's that unique combination that sets us aside. But we don't want to take on overseas funding, but at some point, because we are now opening this new branch, we're going to probably have to do that. So slightly different model to what everyone else has done. We have self-funded as far as we could, and we're now at the point where we are probably going to be bringing in a significant new investment to build the next arm of the company, which is probably going to be ultimately a larger selling part of the business.
Thanks, Mark. And Kevin, you're really focused on the human resources side, and I stepped on your pun, I sense.
Yeah. So LiteFarm is grant and donation funded. So I would say, the project has run out of the University of British Columbia, so we've leaned very heavily on the reputation of the university, and also with collaborations with various researchers, both at UBC and other institutions. I would say, as an organization that has a lot of volunteers, open source contributors, programmers that are donating their time and their code. One way that we were able to move on a fairly small budget is just like putting a flag, in the sand. 5 years from now, this is the vision that we have. And, telling all of your potential partners, telling all of your potential collaborators, putting that out on the internet so that people that align with that vision, that are interested in what you're doing, can join the community, right? And that's how we've established, we've co-authored fairly large grants to fund that vision. That's how folks have kind of come out of the woodwork and said, this is a community that I want to be involved with. So, just like clearly articulating where you're going and then building the channels to allow people to get involved with whatever their skill sets are.
Thanks. And to you, Peter?
A couple of things I think we've all learned about entrepreneurism is a crappy idea with great follow-through and execution will always usurp a great idea with crappy execution
Amen.
and follow-through. And making sure that execution and follow-through elements are in place and not being delusional about it was difficult for us at first because we're so excited about the tech, the science works, damn it, yeah, it works in the greenhouse, awesome, go, go, go. But we hadn't really thought very, very and specifically about what exactly is our go-to-market strategy, exactly how we're going to do it, and because we didn't really know how. So there was definitely a learning process. However, Foresight, CDL, these organizations helped a lot with that. And the other thing that what really kicked us off is we needed a little bit of money to get started. So it's like every founder's money, right? Like we're like, oh man, I can barely afford to eat pancakes, but because everything's in, right? And the investment community at the angel stage, and if you don't know what that means, like when you're just getting started, the investment community in Canada is very conservative, but the investment community in the US is quite aggressive on that. And they have these investment group and angel forums where you get a whole bunch of people, they all stick in a couple of grand, and they have a challenge. So we did that. And we went to the Seattle Angel Venture Forum. We won first place. We got a big giant check. I mean, well, it was about $120,000, but they give you that huge check, like, look at this. And for fun, we went to the bank to try to cash it. And we have it on video still, which was, they called secure. These guys are crazy. But no, we're not crazy. So that was a challenge in Canada, but that's one way to get over it. That initial funding stage is very, very difficult. Very few companies pass that. So if your technology is great, if your business idea is great, if you have a reasonably well done sales and marketing program, how to get there, how to monetize, you get all those ducks in a row, then you can go outside of Canada for that initial seed.
Thanks. Are we going to have some time for questions? We have about 5 minutes. Do we want to do some questions? All right, we have one question, I think. Or we're going to do a quick lightning round, and then if you want to ask a question, put up your hand. So we have lots of we've had policymakers and politicians here all day. So real quickly, if you'd like to see one thing change, policy change in Canada, what would you like to see change? We'll start with you, Hassan.
I'm just going to say this. All the policies and laws were made years ago when some of us weren't even around and how the technologies weren't here. I think it's time that we actually go back, the same thing we had with drones. Are these rules still applicable today? Have we changed? Are we still living back where our forefathers said they were the best ever? And this is one of the biggest challenges I see just for entrepreneurship, where we are challenging change and regulations, rules do not incorporate, do not catch up. So the quicker you can have those policies and regulations meet where the technology is, have those discussions, put those policies in place, that would accelerate technology demand.
Thanks. Mark, real quick.
For me, I think one of the most important would be to get government to work in parallel as a group. So you have all the different arms of government getting together and saying, we have got drones in, or we've got robotics, or we've got some new technology that we have to address. Instead of what we've had to do is where we go through Transport Canada, NAV Canada, Health Canada, PMRA, and then back to NAV Canada, and going through all these different hoops in series. So that would definitely shorten the time frame that we have to work with, but it would also make sure that the regulations that are brought in then are working together. They're synergistic as opposed to contradictory, and then you're not knowing sure which one you're actually supposed to follow.
Kevin, real quick.
Yeah, I don't have specific concrete guidance, so I would just say a broad statement, that is entrepreneurship is hard, right? If you look at, this may not be the newest statistics, but if you look at a company over 5 years, 95% of them will fail, right? So if you're a policymaker, if you're a post-secondary institution, I really want you to take what Peter said earlier, that an invention is one thing, but getting that invention and mobilizing it or scaling it so that it's actually having an impact is a completely different thing. So if your goal is to get ag tech out there, it's to get innovations out so that they're having a huge impact, then keep that in mind when you're supporting entrepreneurs or you're supporting innovation communities like we're talking about today.
Thanks. Peter, lightning around.
I'll be really brief. In the United States, for example, we've got our products registered, they're crop inputs, and of course we need inspection agencies to keep those inputs safe. The demands, or rather the standards, must be very high. We completely support that, but I'm going to give you two numbers. In the US, you have to apply to each state to get your fertilizer products approved. In the US, it's 60 days. In Canada, under CFIA, it's 2 years. Mm-hmm. The problem is CFIA is understaffed. So if there's any from the federal government, I know it's provincial level, one thing that will definitely help is to improve that turnaround time, because delays can be company killers. Because while you're waiting for your approval, you're just burning money like crazy. So that is a barrier to innovation.
Thanks. Tanya?
I think for me, like we already spoke about capital support and everything else, but for me, like the policymakers are putting everything out there in the policy to attract these investments, because we are an investor and operator, but they're not doing enough to retain these investments in the agtech sector. So is BC going to continue to be the agtech center? Probably not. Are we going to invest again here? Right now, no. So the policymakers need to look at that. Like attracting investment, great, we're doing a great job at it, but we're not doing enough to retain it.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for one real quick question. I think we have one over here.
All right, so Abbotsford has, what, 3.8 billion in revenue in ag. If you strip out growers, strip out primary processors, strip out cold storage, you strip out ag tractors and all that out, and you drill down to hard infrastructure, food manufacturers here in Abbotsford. I count 12. That's a real problem. You want to address climate change, you want to address costs, input costs. All of our manufacturing happens overseas. There's a recent report by York University that talks about the middle. There's lots of development that happens at the micro level, lots of development that helps with exports. But what infrastructure in BC or in Canada really exists to help scale? And that's missing brick and mortar supports to help scale food manufacturers.
Thanks.
I just want to add to that one, right? So one of the times we had was exactly the same thing. Blueberries and cranberries get collected in Surrey and then get shipped over to Massachusetts to get produced, and then gets shipped back to us. That's a carbon footprint where a lot of people don't realize. Me coming from the oil and gas industry as well, understanding the carbon supply chain, right? One aspect that would be helpful overall is having a place where ag tech companies can actually come and work. We have these tech districts, we have educational institutes where it's only education. It would be nice if there was an area where it was just ag tech, where all of us could be in different buildings coming in like, hey, you have this problem, can you help? Because a lot of the solutions are working in collaboration and just by the collision, but ag tech companies here don't have that access. If there is a way where economic protected zones, where it comes out from the Middle East, where they'll have companies of the same industry work together in the same area, giving them different tax rates, supporting them on hiring people, right? Getting that area will be right in the middle factor, right? Helping that middle area be covered. And that's the bridge which is missing between farms and producers.
Thanks, Hassan. I think that's a good place to leave it. Thanks so much to our panelists and to all of you for being here, and thank you.